Hello, and welcome to another episode of Mindset Over Matter. I'm your host, Gabby Gooding, and today I would like to tackle the topic of how we can use questions to get more out of life. Now, it seems like a fundamental part of the human experience is searching for answers in life, right? What's right? What's wrong? What career should I have? What goals should I aim for? How can I achieve success? Big answers that we're looking for, right? But I'm starting to understand that instead of trying to figure out the right answers in life, we would be much better off trying to figure out the right questions first. Now, in most parts of life, I believe we get to a point where we may feel stuck and perhaps like we don't know what to do next. We're faced with a problem that we don't have a solution to, or we're in a situation that's just no longer working. And this feeling of being stuck, I'm thinking, is actually just a realization that we're repeating the same answer to the same question over and over, and we're making no progress. Einstein actually considered this to be the definition of insanity, trying the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. So, what's the solution? Ask a better question. If you notice, our greatest advancements in thought or in our understanding of the physical world historically have been thanks to the fact that we had great questioners who got us thinking about what we knew to be true, in quotes, in a new way. So this leads me to believe that asking the right questions is the key to success or to progress. Another thing that Einstein said actually is that instead of aiming to be a person of success, you should aim to be a person of value. And I think that's incredibly important because we hear so much about success, and I just feel like it's such a loaded word because it's typically ill-defined, or it's defined by others and not ourselves, which I would argue is ill-defined for our own purposes. And aiming to be a person of value just there's so much more behind that can get you so much further. And I think even just thinking about what does it mean to be a person of value stretches your thinking in a way that matters so much more than trying to be a person of success. So I love that quote, and I think it fits in perfectly with today's topic. So the conclusion specifically that I've come to is that you become far more valuable by being the person who can help expose answers rather than trying to be the person who already has them, or worse, neither. And so those two things are categorically different, right? Being the person who can help expose answers, you're the catalyst to the answer versus having answers. And they are different, and I want to draw attention to that because if you are someone who is a catalyst to answers, a catalyst to innovation, a catalyst to ideas, a catalyst to progress, you are infinitely valuable. That is something that doesn't expire. That is something that becomes inherent in who you are, and it becomes something that is transcendent in terms of the field that you're working in, the people that you're dealing with, the project that you're working on. You can take that and apply it into a lot of different parts of life. Versus if you are the person who already has the answers, that's finite, right? That's a resource that's going to run out eventually. And so although you may feel like you're more valuable in the moment, if you happen to have the answer to the question that's being asked in front of you in this given moment, that runs out, right? And so I do think that these two things are categorically different, and it's important to be able to think about them differently. And what this comes down to, I think, is that how your ability to be able to ask questions, great targeted thought through questions and thought-provoking questions will end up giving you access to a whole different version of the truth, various versions of the truth, access to new answers, new ideas, new innovation, a greater level of understanding of a current situation. And this is something that you end up being able to offer yourself, and it's something that you are able to offer others as well, which adds to your value on any team that you join or any person that you interact with. And so I wanted to dive into this concept of questions. And as humans, we love to categorize things. And so I came across Tom Adams just recently on YouTube, and he did a great job of offering 6 different types of questions that exist. Now, I don't think that we need to be walking around trying to categorize or label every single question that we ask as one of these 6, but I do think that it's valuable to be able to recognize that the part that questions play in everyday situations are different. There are different types of probing. There's different types of probing that we can do with the questions that we choose to ask, and each has value in a slightly different way. And so I wanted to list them out for you guys in case it helps you frame question types like it did for me. So the first one is what Tom called a situation question. And so that helps us gain a better understanding of what's happening. It answers the question, what's happening in the current moment? What's the current situation? Just to get a better sense in general, right? General question, but often a really great place to start. Then number 2, we have clarification questions. So that helps us answer something like, why did you say that? What's behind that statement? What's behind that position that you're taking, right? Just to get a little bit more information. Number 3 is most likely my all-time favorite of the 6. And they're questions that help us probe assumptions. And so this helps us answer something like, what could we assume instead of this? Now, almost 100% of the time, there are underlying assumptions behind statements of fact, seemingly, that are made, right? Definitions, assumptions on definitions that are assumed to be true or assumed to be commonly accepted among the people that are part of the conversation, I would say. And despite the fact that it can be difficult to challenge or question these without sounding patronizing in a way, it is often the case that people don't actually know why they hold the opinions that they do or why they choose a certain course of action or even a certain word, right? That they're using, or a certain term or a certain position that they're taking. And so being able to probe on this just a little bit further makes this type of question extremely valuable, right? It really, if nothing else, it makes sure that everybody that's part of the conversation is on the same page. And if I cannot tell you the immense value that has, especially if you're part of a board meeting of some kind, or honestly, any meeting at all, as soon as there are 2 or more people interacting and discussing a certain topic, I think that we overestimate how much people are on the same page when it comes to things that they're discussing. And I think this can make or break how much time we spend on discussing things, how many misunderstandings we end up having, how much back and forth is required between different stakeholders. I really can't stress how important this type of question really is. And so probing assumptions, big supporter, big fan. Hopefully that makes sense to you all. And so the 4th type is related, also a probing type of question, but we're probing this time for reasons or evidence. And so this is where we're asking something like, what would be an example of the thing that you're sharing, right? And even more so, I would say, I would almost add a layer of context into this as well. So you're able to ask a question like, what would be an example of this in context of X? And this is incredibly valuable, especially if you have representatives of various teams that are at a table to talk about a certain product, a certain service, a certain project, maybe a certain goal on a team. Usually you're there to represent the folks that maybe use the product in a certain way or something like that, right? And so you're an advocate at the table, essentially, right? You were sent there to be the voice on behalf of others. And so asking this type of contextual probing question can be very valuable as well, right? As sort of a voice for others. So that's question type number 4. Question type number 5 has to do with viewpoints or perspectives. So also very valuable, asking questions that'll get at, what's another way that we could look at this? Now, especially I want to point out, as an entrepreneur, or if you work in sales in any capacity, as a side note, I believe every business is sales to some extent. This type of question is invaluable. It's invaluable to be able to view your product, your service, whatever your offering is, from the perspective of your customer. I would say there are 2 things. 1, your customer, and B, your competitor. These are 2 perspectives or viewpoints that you absolutely want to be considering. And so if you can force yourself to engage in that line of thinking, or if you can be the person at the table that asks questions that encourage others to think about this, you can probably save yourself a lot of money, really, and the business a lot of money down the road. Right? You're either going to gain more market share, or you're going to prevent a loss of market share. Those are the 2. Gaining, as looking at from the perspective of the customer, that's gaining market share. Thinking about the situation in context of your competitor, that's preventing loss of market share. Right? Both you're compounding your benefit by thinking about both. So also very valuable. And so lastly, question type number 6 has to do with implications and consequences. So how does X affect Y? Now, again, the more levels that you can explore of this, the more valuable you become as a thinker on the team, right? Or just for yourself even, because it's almost like the more layers of the hypothetical onion that you can peel back with this line of thinking, the more value you're adding. So let's say that you're selling a product and you're thinking, okay, well, how does the price affect the product? Very basic sales question. Okay, well, how does the sale of this product affect my customer? That's a great second level kind of question to ask, right? Beyond just, okay, well, what happens after the sale? Okay, well, then level 3 might be, how does my customer owning this product affect his or her social circle, or his or her family, or his or her work life, right? Okay, well then how does him or her having a better or worse or different in some way social life, work life, whatever, affect X, Y, and Z? Like, there are multiple levels and layers to this line of thinking that I really think can add a lot of value as well. So definitely worth noting. Now, so those are the 6 types of questions, if that helps at all, just to at least expand our thinking of what types of questions are out there and how we can use them. But a note that I wanted to make is that the quality of the question that you're asking will almost always determine the quality of the answer that you get in return. And so, in a nutshell, getting high quality answers will take asking high quality questions. That's a fact. Now, why do we care about getting high quality answers? Because they pave a much clearer path for action for us, which will allow us to make progress faster, or can help us become more valuable to others faster, which is the goal, right? So let me give you an example. If you are in your mid-year performance review at work and you ask your boss, what could I do better? Vague, right? You're likely to get a vague answer in response. Something along the lines of, keep doing what you're doing, right? That doesn't give you a lot of direction. However, if you ask something like, what are 3 gaps that you're seeing in our business right now that my role specifically could play a part in closing over the next 3 to 6 months? Right? Still not the most specific question to ask. It's very hard to do, I'll admit, with just a generic example without knowing the details of your business. But you're already more likely to get a more thoughtful, pointed answer that offer you 3 areas that are important to your boss where you can make an impact. And if that's not valuable, I don't know what is, because this gives you direct action items that you can use over the next 3 to 6 months. And this gives you ammunition 3 to 6 months from now at your year-end review to say, hey, you told me that if I did A, B, and C, I would be of extra value to you and the team. I did A, B, and C, and now, you're basically saying I've delivered on what you've asked for, and so there's no excuse to say that I haven't met expectation or anything like that, right? It's quantifiable evidence that you're thinking outside the box, you're looking actively for ways to provide extra value to the team, and that you've delivered on something that's important to the team, that's important to the higher ups, right? So with all that said, now we know that there are different types of questions. We know that we should aim to use high quality questions, but what exactly do these high quality questions do for us? And so I thought about this a little bit, and I've come up with at least 3 ways that I can think of that we can use these high quality questions to get ahead. Number 1, we can use these high quality questions to guide a conversation. Now, I would argue that this is probably the most powerful use of questions, because when done correctly, you can control the narrative of a conversation by asking questions the right way. Now, we see this a lot in interrogation techniques, for instance, used by police. They are literally experts at framing their questions in a way that encourage an admission from the suspect without presenting any false information. Now, might seem a little bit sketchy to put it that way, and it may seem a little bit manipulative. And in the most real sense of the word, it kind of is. You are manipulating the conversation or the direction of the conversation to your advantage, to your benefit. But it's very interesting to see how powerful this can be, because to the suspect being interrogated, you notice the response that you get back when you ask a very targeted, very thought through question that's aimed to guide the conversation a certain way. The suspect is inclined to respond with something like, well, technically yes, but it wasn't quite like that, right? So it's really like, well, you haven't said anything false, but also I'd rather put this a different way to make myself look better, right? But what that means, though, is that the interrogator has done an exceptional job of guiding the conversation in a way that benefits them. And so I only say that to support that there is a lot of power in how we ask our questions. And this isn't to say that we have to become interrogation experts or that an average daily conversation has to feel like you're part of some criminal case. But my point is that our language that we choose to use and our positioning can seriously impact the outcome of our conversations. And we can use that to our benefit, whether we like the sound of that or not. Let me give you an example that might be hit a little closer to home than interrogation rooms. And so if you're at a networking event, let's say, or having a career chat with somebody, very common in the corporate world, you likely want to find a way to add value to the person that you're speaking to, ideally, which is tough to do in a very short span of time that you have with them. Or at least you would like to be remembered, right? I think that really is the goal these days. Typically with networking events, career chats, if you're having an interaction with somebody in that context, typically you and the other person are also interacting with a lot of other people for the same purpose, right? And so it becomes difficult. It becomes a real challenge to try to get remembered. And to achieve this, I believe that you can use high quality questions to guide the conversation in a favorable way. So as an example, instead of asking something like, what do you do for work? Which they've likely been asked a million times, or at least by every other person in the room that day, and they probably have a well-polished, well-rehearsed answer to, consider asking them something like, what's a challenge that you or your team have been facing recently? Something along the lines of, what keeps you up at night? Or something like, what's the next step that you would like to take in your business? What's the next level? Where would you like to take your business next? Right? Or if you're comfortable asking this, and not everybody will be, it's sort of a time and place and relationship with the person kind of question, but you could ask them, why do you do what you do for work? I would bet money on the fact that they don't get that one as often as, what do you do for work? Right? And so notice that the first two questions, especially the ones I asked, which were, what's a challenge that you've been facing lately, or what's the next step for your business? Those types of questions immediately offer up an opportunity for you to add value to that person, to their business, to their problem that they're facing, or at least introduce them to someone who could help in the ways that they need. Now, this is really a golden opportunity because these are obviously challenges that are important to the person that you're speaking with. And if you can be the one who helped them directly, or at least were the person who introduced them to someone who helped, you'll automatically become someone of tremendous value to them, and they will remember you, all because you asked the right question. Okay? So this is, long-winded way of saying you can guide a conversation to your advantage by asking the right question. Okay, number 2, you can use great questions to expose a new truth or an answer. Okay, now this I would say is very valuable, but there's an extra layer to this that I want to make clear. So if you go into a situation where you might even think that you have the answer, which as a side note, I don't think we ever have the final answer to anything. That's sort of a bias or a thought pattern or a frame that we should eliminate permanently if we can. But even if you think that you do, you should be willing to engage in an exercise of exploratory questioning. Okay, so what I mean by that is I really think that the best answers or ideas come out when you can present your questions with zero expectations. So as an example, I recently had a brainstorming session with my team at work about a project that we're looking to evolve. And as we were going through the brainstorming sessions, one of my direct reports said to me repeatedly, don't solve, stop trying to solve, we're not, stop with the solutions. As soon as I tried to say something, she would literally interrupt me, cut me off mid-sentence and say, stop trying to solve. And I really respected that, actually. I was glad that she felt comfortable being that way. I mean, we were all very much in the zone in this brainstorming question, but she was right, though. I was trying to jump to solutions when the purpose of our brainstorming really was to try and actually get at the right question. At least that part of the brainstorming session, we were trying to get at the right question, and I was jumping in with solutions because I'm just a fixer by nature, and it's really hard. It's really hard to be able to step back from that and only focus on the question part. But all in all, this is a really great way to inspire innovation, right? I had this idea once on the flip side of things. I know I'm naturally a fixer, but on the flip side of things, I have been trying to ask myself and others on my team, actually, at work every once in a while, a question that goes something like this. If we could do X, usually a process of some kind for one of our projects, if we could do this any way at all, except the way that we're currently doing it, what would that look like? And so this is very much a probing assumptions or viewpoints, trying to get at new perspectives kind of question. And it's cool to me to be able to recognize it as that now, because asking these types of questions forces you and others in the room to really expand your thinking, because in a way, you're giving yourself and others the permission to explore new possibilities without judgment, because you asked for it, right? You asked for anything but the status quo. That's the point. You're asking for anything but the status quo. And if you're presented with the status quo, it's not accepted. That's not what we're going for, right? You failed at the task if you present the status quo. So it kind of inherently creates a safe space for everybody to be able to expand their thinking. And so this is way number 2 that we can use, high quality questions. And it's actually quite opposite, almost exactly opposite to the guiding a conversation way. Because guiding a conversation means I have a specific end goal in mind and I'm going to get us there by using the right questions. This one is I'm going to force myself to not have a specific end goal in mind. We're just here to explore. We're here to innovate. We're here to stretch our thinking, right? Both valuable in the right context, but totally opposite if you ask me. All right. So way number 3 that we can use questions is to strengthen your current position. Essentially, what we're looking to do here is we're looking to ask enough questions to ourselves often to get to a point where we can really play devil's advocate for ourselves. And then ideally, if we can shut down all of those devil's advocate questions that we're asking ourselves, then we end up feeling extra solid about our initial position. Now, this one, I will admit, is probably the toughest one to go into without an agenda, because of course we want to prove ourselves right. And it becomes very difficult to separate that from our questions that we're asking ourselves. Ideally, you would have a team around you, or at least a couple people that can act as sort of sounding boards, right? Or can help you question whatever position you're trying to question. But if you can do that and you're still able to defend your position, I would say that's the ideal situation. Right? And so in the example I just shared about actively trying to find new ways of doing something, if you go through that exercise with full intentions of finding a better way, you want anything except the status quo, but even after all of that, you end up coming back to the status quo, you come back to the current process that you're using anyway, that strengthens your position like nothing else. And it can really make you feel better about your current situation. And I do think there's value in being able to validate that for yourself, for your team, for your higher ups a lot of times, right? But all of that doesn't happen without questioning things first, okay? So to recap all of this for us, number 1, asking the right questions is a key to success. It is a key to becoming more valuable, which, side note, that's how you win in life, in my opinion. You become valuable to others. Number 1 way to get ahead. Number 2, you can use high quality questions to A, guide a conversation in a way that suits you. B, expose a new truth or answer or idea or innovation. Or C, to strengthen your current position. Number 3, as a reminder, you become far more valuable and memorable, typically, by being the person who can help expose answers rather than being the person or trying to be the person who already has the answers, right? And the way to master this really is to master the art of asking great questions. So my call to action for anyone listening would be 3 things. First, try to bring attention to the areas in your life that you ask questions. This can be even basic ones, like when you ask your partner or your friend, how was your day? Side note, vague. You're likely to get a vague answer, right? That's the quality of your question is going to dictate the quality of your answer. So just brace yourself for that. But at least bring attention to the areas in your life where you're asking these questions. Number 2, ask yourself how you could elevate the quality of the questions that you're asking. If you are not getting the answers that you want in any part of your life, you are likely not asking the right questions. Okay, we need to take a little bit of responsibility for that, right? It's not just the person on the other side. It could very well be us as well, not asking the right questions. And number 3, I would encourage you to also think about areas in your life in which you aren't asking questions at all. What aspects of your life are you just accepting and not questioning? And how could you use questions to move the dial in those areas in your life? Okay. That last one might take a journal entry to answer. Fair. But it is beyond worth considering, in my opinion. So on that reflective note, we will leave it there for today. As always, I do hope you found this topic interesting, and I thank you for listening. I'm always so grateful for your time and attention. Please do consider sharing this episode with someone that you know. And of course, any likes, shares, or subscriptions also go a long way. So thank you in advance. Thank you once again for listening, and we will see you on our next episode of Mindset Over Matter. Take care.